writing about a cloud city that existed to purify lead from galena. Lead is a good lubricator for steam powering engines. I read that some time ago, so I better double check it. Turns out lead's not the number one thing today, but during the time of Leadville and the time the Jewish people fixed the stock market, it turned out to be very important, that Cloud City. And how can we get there? The stock market cannot get far from Operation Paperclip's V2 rocket. It was one of the first major dot connecting I was provided by the Most High Spirit when I arrived in Alamosa. I have that video from 2023, October, pulled up to verify that. Welcome, everybody, to Mud Flood Was Armageddon. The Mud Flood was the Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. Now, we got a whole lot of conservative things going on, right? It seems like we got the Democrats on the run, but what does history tell us? It's going to be cyclical. And what have I said about the Obamas? They're not through with our history. Somehow, some way, it's not going away. The Michelle Obama being gay man dressed like a woman who pretended to be the female vice president is one of those things that is going to have to be exposed. And they're going to be unashamed about it. They're going to be like, we had to do it because of you people that let Donald Trump somehow go crazy. And if something happens, it's the Obamas. They'll be in on it. But that has the dot connecting today is Holy Spirit filled. Please bear with me. Please give this a chance. You will not think that the Holy Spirit did not tell you to give it a chance. There's your disclaimer. I'll be looking at a lot of videos for their fair use value to do, re, mi. So that's the thumbnail, right? Or I believe we're showing that thumbnail. This is the ice castle built a couple of years after the stock market crashed and Leadville went boom. Leadville, Colorado. You'll learn a lot about that today. I was reading, and I think I left this video pulled up, Unearthing Rosewood. Again, the violence, the lynchings that took over our country was in the United States was just crazy. And they were talking about it, and they were 1908, they burned a town out. And this talks about his wife of the county of Levi. It is in the state of Florida. Parties of the first part and the Magnolia Lodge, number 148 of the Free and Accepted Masons. So even the black people who were being persecuted were part of the great Masonic movement that left us with Masonic lodges in every town. And I guess it used to be a big deal. Where are they today? There's a few of them out there. This is Leadville, 1879. They had the Leadville Waterworks, a Bank of Leadville. I don't see any churches. Anybody see any churches? A sawmill. But this became the second largest city in Denver, and it's the 2 Mile High city. It's Cloud City. I was looking at my local newspaper and it had a meeting of the Democrats. They're furious about what Trump is doing. And, it's a college town. They had a guy in here, Army veteran spoke. Many people spoke about how the impact is just over the top of what he's done. This former Army veteran, that's all we know, spoke on the recent federal developments and their impact on disabled veterans like himself. Francis said that the recent cuts to the Veterans Administration have resulted in the dismissal of physicians. And now the wait time to see a doctor can be about 8 months. I think it always has been pretty long, pretty long. He also, Mr. Francis, disabled veteran, said the suicide prevention phone lines for veterans have been disconnected. There have already been 83,000 employees cut at the VA, and so it's going on and on like that. That's quite a statement. And I would be very surprised if they really did stop, because somehow I think that they have those programmed, I thought I had a phone number for a local thing there. That's that little pause and that giddy up. I hope I was sharing the screen right there. But what I'm going to do is look up let's just call them. Because in my world, they usually start out with a reminder that if you're thinking of harming yourself, call a number.
Eastern Colorado Healthcare Systems, Rocky Mountain Regional VA Medical Center. If you are having a medical or mental health emergency, please hang up and dial 911. If you are having thoughts of suicide, press 7 now to be connected to the Veterans Crisis Line, or you may hang up and dial 988, then press 1. The PACT Act is a new law that expands VA healthcare and benefits for veterans exposed to burn pits and other toxic substances. For further assistance regarding the PACT Act.
So it seems like to win an argument, the truth doesn't matter. They're going to say that, but what does matter is that people that want to please the Lord are going to keep digging and finding out, connecting the dots. It's been a recent reset. Satan's loosed. It is the short season. I started a channel in 2016, Flat Earth Nation Golden Age Past, because the Flat Earth Nation is super important. Was I done looking at those pictures? We had the Leadville. We had the break. Called that. Sorry, liberal newspaper in a college town. You're wrong about that. In 1893, the Herald Democrat, reviewing the events of the year, expressed, "Those were the days of panic and gloom for Leadville. Ruin and bankruptcy stared every mining man, every smelting man, every businessman in the face except one, Meyer Guggenheim." Meyer Guggenheim. And here's just a little bit of that. The castle housed a ballroom. So this is from that, and we'll look at that. Here it is we saw 79. Here's 82. Is this even the same town? And before we were looking at, for a church, and all of a sudden there's Baptist, Congregational, Evangelical, Methodist, Presbyterian, Roman Catholic, Episcopalian, Methodist, Episcopal. That's usually a black church, African Methodist. And St. Vincent Hospital usually came with a St. Mary's orphanage. 16,000 people. I don't know if it listed one on the other one, but that just became when the system wants to throw money at a town, they'll make, I mean, it had trolleys, horse-drawn trolleys, but trolleys. And this town maybe it's 2 miles high. It's cold there all the time. It's it's cold place. It's brutal winter. It's snow everywhere. They're shut down, lockdown. But maybe for gold, you can make it happen. We'll look at Leadville. Lead paste was one of the best steam age technologies, extreme pressure lubricants. It was used to lube lathe bed centers, press fits, installation of class 5 studs, steady rest jaws, etc. And it's a good paint, as this person said. And that's from a Woolsey paint chemist. Boy, nobody wants to argue with those guys in the comments. That's from 2004. Here's from an abstract I was looking at. I don't know how I'll add this, but we are going to look at what powers the steam rocket. H2O2, you know it as the 3% H2O2 you sometimes gargle with or clean wounds with. Treatment of cells with H2O2 or thrapsargin resulted in activation of a pro-apoptotic protein bid. Furthermore, co-immunoprecipitation experiments showed active BAX was bound to BID, which regulates BID activity and promotes apoptosis. That's what we're looking for. Somehow, you know, me Familia, we care about apoptosis, our mitochondria, and as hydrogen peroxide can help us, good. The world's first jetliner, the de Havilland DH-106 Comet, included a design provision to carry 2 hydrogen peroxide powered de Havilland Sprite booster rockets intended to be installed for those hot and high conditions from airports such as Khartoum and Nairobi, where they just had to really power them up. And it took, I think, into the 60s, 50s until they didn't need hydrogen peroxide. I tried to click on it like it was a video. Meteorite rocket startles Worcester. This is a part of history you're going to need to know. Clark's professors' test of new propellant to explore air strata brings police to the scene. And you can see there is a closed caption on this video thing. It says, days later, in the narration of Robert Goddard, Miss to Rocket Science, an historical documentary by Lucasfilm. They're serious. A few days after the Clark's professor caused a fire that brought police to it, the Nazi-loving Charles Lindbergh and Harry Guggenheim, because the only guy I told you, Meyer Guggenheim, the Jew who sold out at the top of the market before the 1893 silver crash, who became the second richest person only after the Standard Oil Rockefeller in the United States. They read about his rocket launch in the newspaper and then funded it forever. And we wonder with Charles Lindbergh and his connections to the Nazis and everybody else, how they started working on the V2. Oh, this is how people that get conquered greeted the Nazis in Finland. In English? Wait, we'll have to look a little harder. Where was that? We believe in your justice. It's not a movie, I don't think. Were you seeing those pictures? All right. That is nice. Good to see. So, and you know, dozens of people will see this later, but you are the first. You're on the cutting edge. God has you here for a reason. And this is just a reminder. If you need more information on the JFK assassination being a conspiracy, I don't think you're a real conspirator. I don't think you're somebody that, I mean, from the very beginning, it was obvious it was a cover up. The guy who got shot and his wife contradicted the testimony of the Warren report right off the bat. Not only that, when he did it, it was first person. No, we heard this. The first shot, the second shot, the third shot. It's nah. As soon as he heard about the magic bullet, one thing he called the newspaper conference and said, "Nope, this is what happened."
That was fired hit me. The third shot that was fired hit the president.
Shot. They tried to disprove this. They did not like the idea when I came up with the statement that Oswald, as far as I knew, Oswald was a very poor shot.
Who didn't like the idea?
The FBI people that were interviewing me, and they brought two men down, two strangers, to disprove this part of my testimony.
Do you feel that the agents of the FBI actually tried to get you to change your statement that Oswald was a poor shot?
Yes, sir, I definitely do.
How did they do that?
Outside of them calling me something short than a liar, and it's just the way they were throwing the questions at me. They were trying to twist my testimony around.
Okay, here comes the Conley one. That other one, let's say that was a bonus. A couple of minutes on this was all you'll need.
9 wounds, 4 to President Kennedy, 5 to Governor Connolly. Presented the commission with another puzzle. Did 2 bullets do all of the damage? A frame-by-frame study of film taken at the time proved that 2 of the shots occurred within 1.8 seconds. An impossibility. The commission agreed that the rifle could not be operated that quickly. Commission counsel Rankin stated, to say they were hit by separate bullets is synonymous with saying that there were 2 assassins. But 2 assassins did not fit, so a new assumption was made. Nine wounds, 4 to President Kennedy,
Why
5
they
to
show
Governor
that
Connolly.
again?
Presented the commission with another.
Convinced beyond any question of a doubt that the first shot that was fired did not hit me. Then I was hit. And I was not then, and I have no memory, no recollection of the sound of the shot that hit me. And beyond any question of a doubt, the third shot did not hit me. Ms. Connolly has the very definite feeling, a very strong conviction that the first shot that was fired hit the president. The second shot that was fired hit me. The third shot that was fired hit the president. Unquestionably, When the first shot was fired, I recognized it as a shot. I thought of nothing else but that it was a rifle shot. I turned to my right. I had time to think. I had time to react. And I turned to my right to look back over my right shoulder to see if I could see anything unusual, and particularly to see if I could catch him out of the corner of my eye. Because I immediately thought...
Him, you mean
the president.
the president?
Because I immediately thought of an assassination attempt. The moment I heard the shot, I didn't see anything except just the general blur of waving of people moving, but nothing really unusual. I did not see the president out of the corner of my eye, and I was in the process of turning back to look over my left shoulder, and had about come to the point where I was looking straight forward again when I felt the impact of the bullet that hit me. But I know I wasn't hit with the first shot. And then I was hit. And I know I wasn't hit with the third shot. That much I'm absolutely sure of.
Mrs. Connolly, who was seated alongside her husband, also took issue with the one bullet, two victim theory. She testified. It was just a frightening noise, and it came from the right. I turned over my right shoulder and looked back and saw the president as he had both hands at his neck. And it seemed to me he made no utterance, no cry. I saw no blood, no anything. It was just sort of nothing, the expression on his face, and he just sort of slumped down. Then very soon, there was the second shot that hit John. As the first shot was hit and I turned to look at the same time, I recalled John saying, "Oh, no, no, no." Then there was a second shot, and it hit John. And as he recoiled to the right, just crumpled like a wounded animal to the right, he said, "My God, they're going to kill us all." Pictures taken
that government, the academy, science, journalism all needed to pull together, and that this was what we were going to do, and that this is what we needed to do. And indeed, at that point, voices of dissent became scarce. Social media companies began removing some postings that were at odds with government messaging, and dissent dwindled over the summer and into the fall.
Francis, one of the things that was a real revelation to me was how you document in the book that prior to COVID, that there was a good deal of analysis done about what happens if a respiratory virus does emerge. And the consensus, or some version of a consensus, was that lockdowns are not that effective and that they would cost society enormously.
Yes, there had been a tremendous amount of work planning for what to do when the next pandemic arrived. And we took measures in the early going of the pandemic that were at odds with the recommendations. They had been recommended against in some cases. There was a World Health Organization report from November 2019 that looked at what was known about all the proposed non-pharmaceutical interventions.
This is masks, shutdowns, isolation, testing, tracing, et cetera.
Business closures, school closures, looked at what was known about the effectiveness of each of those measures. And across the board, the report states that the evidence base for the effectiveness of each of them was poor. And so it's so striking that then we got 6 months later, and those measures are being employed all around the world with policymakers saying that they're following the science. And of course, it's quite obvious that all of those measures have tremendous costs.
Then, of course, there was the World Health Organization mission that went to China. came back after spending a week there and endorsed the Chinese strategy of lockdowns without qualification and said that the entire world should follow this path of strict lockdowns to suppress the virus. There was a prediction that came out of, based on mathematical models out of Imperial College London, that predicted 2.2 million deaths in the United States by August 2020 if we didn't implement these suite of measures. That led to a kind of panic, I think.
Have to continue on the job regardless.
The so-called essential workers.
Essential workers is about a third of the workforce who had to continue doing their jobs in person all through the lockdowns. And so the virus has to continue to spread under those conditions. Still maintained more restrictions than Republican states. But when you look at cumulative COVID mortality at the time the vaccine rollout started, there's no difference between states that pursued more stringent COVID containment policies and states that were more lax. We can't conclude from this that that means these measures don't work, but it means that there's still a lack of evidence that they do work.
Especially in light of what we now know as the psychological, economic, academic cost for children, for people, for businesses all over this country.
And also fiscal costs, the amount of borrowing that was necessary to finance the shutdowns. It's roughly equivalent as a share of GDP to what we spent on the New Deal and the 2009 financial rescue combined.
Does your authorship of this book help you?
Regardless.
The so-called essential workers.
Essential workers is about a third of the workforce.
Based on mathematical models out of Imperial College London that predicted 2.2 million deaths in the United States by August 2020 if we didn't implement these suite of measures. That led to a kind of panic, I think, and a failure to consider rationally the costs of these measures and the likelihood of their success.
There are a lot of public health experts who look at our experience and say, both in the heat of the moment and in what we've subsequently learned, that keeping people apart, that social distancing initially was a critical part of protecting people. And I wonder what's your take on that?
Well, that was a theory that if we could keep people apart, that we could buy time before vaccines became available. But it had not been tried on any large scale. And I think what was being overlooked during that planning was the large share of the workforce that would have to continue on the job regardless.
The 600 Dutch SS swore an oath of allegiance not to Holland, but Hitler. It was even renamed the Germanic SS in the Netherlands, and soon they would become involved in the Nazis' most terrible crime. It began at dawn on May the 20th, 1941. 10,000 elite German paratroopers, and the lives they cost certainly seem to be proof of that. But does fear of communism justify standing by when over 500,000 ordinary Greeks were starved to death? Does it justify supporting the Nazis' policy of transporting the Jews to the death camps? In terms of percentage of the population, Greece suffered amongst the worst of any country. There's only one person they had in mind. For Mannerheim and Finland, it was a crucial moment. He had to choose between a Finnish democracy, whose weakness he despised, and a nationalist movement which shared his hatred of communism, but also was close to an ideology he feared as much as admired: Nazism. Mannerheim chose democracy. He decided the best way for Finland to resist the Russians was for him to stay out of politics and reorganize and rearm the Finnish army. for many of the atrocities carried out under the Nazi regime, in particular, the Holocaust. There was no Holocaust in Finland, but German SS officers were allowed a pretty free rein to interrogate political radicals and prisoners, especially those who were Jewish. But it was the final concession made by Mannerheim and Ritty to the Nazis that would prove the most troublesome. The Finns agreed to the German request to recruit volunteers to join the Waffen-SS on the Eastern Front. Amongst these volunteers was Konstantin Kandi.
Gedanke war ja, eine Siedlungsaktion vorzunehmen. Das heißt, sozusagen die slawischen Anteile der Bevölkerung zu verdrängen.
But the Führer wasn't here just for a birthday party. There were one or two key problems with the German-Finnish cooperation on Hitler's mind, which was the real reason he made the trip. He needed a deal. A deal which involved
Finns and Nazis working together.
Russia, helping the German army secure Leningrad. And a deal which enabled him to keep the Finnish SS volunteers fighting.
This is just one of those things I didn't know about, so I had to share it. Were they mad at him after the war for helping the Nazis?
In the north. By the end of 1943, they were refusing to take part in any offensive military operations that might help Germany. The trouble was, the Russians had another agenda.
Uh-oh.
As they drove the Nazis out of Russia, so the Red Army targeted the Finnish front as part of a new initiative against Germany called Operation Bagration.
Operation what?
Within days, the Russians had pushed the Finnish army back. And were...
All right, so they kind of protected the Russians. The Russians said no.
None of this would have been possible without German support. The deal with Germany had secured Finland's future. And now the Finns would repay the Germans by going back on what they had promised. They claimed that they weren't bound by President Risto Ritti's personal agreement not to agree a separate peace with Russia, because Ritty hadn't got Parliament's support and so had acted illegally.
A good one.
Ritty resigned. Mannerheim took over as president and was able to negotiate a separate peace between Finland and Russia without reference to Germany.
That's because he was the handshaking Hitler friend. To this day, Mannheim is the most popular person in Finland.
Much more fortunate. The mathematician and Nazi sympathizer Rolf Nevenlina had to resign as rector of Helsinki University. But then, like the other Finnish intellectuals who backed the Nazis, he was left alone by the Russians.
I wonder why.
He took up a lucrative professorship in Switzerland, and in the 1950s became one of Finland's most revered public figures.
Even the Nazis in Operation Paperclip, they didn't really suffer in the long run for...
His reputation remains virtually unblemished today. The reputation of Carl Gustav Mannerheim has, if anything, increased. Although just as guilty as Ritty in cooperating with the Nazis, his national popularity meant that it was too difficult for the Russians to put him on trial. He escaped any retribution whatsoever. After resigning as president, he took another even more rewarded retirement, which this time didn't involve shooting tigers.
Let's move on. So the Guggenheims.
Alongside artistic patronage, though death claimed him in 1949 before witnessing Wright's completed spiral masterpiece. While Solomon redirected family capital toward cultural influence, his nephew, Harry F. Guggenheim, ventured into media, founding Newsday on September 3, 1940. Initially dismissed as merely an occupation to keep his wife, Alicia Patterson, out of trouble, the newspaper flourished under her leadership as
Well,
Long
I'll
Island's
bet.
population exploded after World War II.
I'm thinking sexual shenanigans was probably her trouble.
Paper's trajectory
But I
revealed
don't know.
inherent tensions between the conservative Guggenheim values and evolving American politics. After Patterson's death in 1960,
Did they just say the conservative things he wanted? Oh, man.
Harry hired Bill Moyers as publisher, but their political differences proved insurmountable. Moyers' liberal leanings and opposition to the Vietnam War created unbridgeable divisions, eventually forcing his departure in 19...
Wow. A little bit more about these guys. From, so the second richest man in America, the Guggenheims, the one who made you, think that what is art? It's what the artist says it is. No, it's supposed to be something beautiful that people appreciate. He came from nowhere, rose to be the second most powerful, strongest, richest man in the world.
Traversed the rough coal towns of northeastern Pennsylvania as a peddler, carrying household goods from door to door, a familiar pattern to the boy who had once sold articles through the streets of Lungno. Gradual
Nice
success
hat.
came through methodical expansion into manufacturing, first stove polish, then lye, then synthetic coffee, while simultaneously developing
Synthetic coffee in 1840s?
a wholesale business in household merchandise. Meyer's commercial instincts proved remarkably adaptable, identifying opportunities invisible to others. His first significant breakthrough emerged through Swiss embroidery and lace, a venture leveraging his European connections. Recognizing America's appetite for...
So the dirt poor person had European connections, and he was able to get the poor working class to make me some lace.
Decorative luxuries, Meyer dispatched 2 sons to Switzerland to establish factories, generating a modest
Boy,
fortune
those
by
kids
importing
are
and
good
selling
at
their
working.
craftsmanship throughout the United
Lace
States.
machines.
The strategy revealed Meyer's fundamental business philosophy, identifying cross-border opportunities and deploying family members as trusted.
It doesn't seem like it seems like he was set up to come over here, start a business, and then this doesn't say, it just talks about how successful and smart he is and set up his family like the Rothschilds. We just don't talk about him that much or at all. Went up to Leadville because somebody owed him a debt, so he paid him with a silver mine.
Building their first plant in Pueblo, Colorado, an operation generating approximately $1 million annually in profit. The family relocated their headquarters to New York City, America's financial capital, in 1889. Daniel's crowning achievement arrived in 1901 with the merger creating the American Smelting and Refining Company, consolidating unprecedented control over global metal production. In late divergent corporate, political, and cultural ambitions, their female counterparts often found themselves navigating the complex intersection of
Peggy Guggenheim, shown here on the screen, brags that she slept with over 1,000 men, even though she was Jewish. And she couldn't go into a lot of clubs, but one guy, I guess, held out for $100,000, Jackson Pollock. But he did it, 100 grand.
extraordinary wealth and societal expectations. Peggy Guggenheim emerged as perhaps the most consequential female figure in the family's history, rejecting conventional restraint for bohemian liberation that scandalized her conservative relatives. Born Marguerite Guggenheim in 1928 to Benjamin Guggenheim, who would later perish aboard the Titanic, she inherited both tremendous wealth and the burden of her family's industrial legacy without inheriting their commercial instincts. Known for wild parties in 1920s Paris, she developed a reputation as sexually liberated and art-obsessed, often referred to as the female Casanova, and rumored to have had 1,000 lovers, including Samuel Beckett. with whom she reportedly experienced a memorable education about modern art during a prolonged day and night in bed. Unlike her uncle Solomon, who collected established artists,
Jeez.
such places in England, but it was in the midst of the most lovely country. Naturally, it had a fine pub. This brief
Anyway, this whole film never talks about how he sold out at the very top of the market.
demonstrating their wide-ranging influence across multiple fields of human endeavor. After 87 years advancing scientific knowledge, the Foundation officially terminated on June 30th, 2011, with some functions transferred to a program on
Rocket
demography,
control.
technology, and criminal
Look
justice.
at that. So they're the guys that brought the Nazi rockets, or taught the Jet Propulsion Lab was that guy. But this guy, Goddard, who did the rockets in America, the liquid fuel, which they would say they need to go to the moon, had all the patents. So he made all the money too. We're moving on. This is this guy. He was funded by one of those Guggenheims.
The nozzles are those three great big black bells at the bottom where the fire.
So that's one of his patents.
That seems just common sense, but no. Somebody had to think of it first, and Goddard was the one.
How about that? That's that guy on the left. He thought of coning off the steam from the hydrogen peroxide and kerosene that we've been using since he invented it. Nazis got their hands on it somehow.
Not only a brilliant inventor, Goddard was savvy enough to protect his work. He would eventually claim over 200 patents. But some of his ideas were too advanced for the time, or his own engineering skills.
But that's okay. Werner von Braun can do it later, but he'll get the patents.
One crucial Goddard patent that others perfected later was staging.
And he's the guy that proved thrust can work in a vacuum. Sure. Police came, and with them, Goddard's salvation. Just to prove that I wasn't kidding you about that Guggenheim and his paper running wife to keep her from trouble, probably with guys like RJ before he repented.
Came, and with them,
Look at the size of that dude.
Salvation.
Oh, those are
days
children.
Later, Charles Lindbergh and Harry Guggenheim read about his rocket launch in a newspaper.
Now, who are these characters? Charles Lindbergh's the most famous human on the planet at the time because of his flight in 1927. Harry
I'm
Guggenheim.
going to do one of that. I'm going to interrupt the show again like I did earlier. I did it earlier. But this time I'm going to put in... Was he a bigamist? How greatest hero, a man whose utterances carried tremendous weight. He was a unapologetic bigotry. What? He was married to 3 people and the wives didn't know about each other. If he was unapologetic, how come he didn't talk about it at the time? How come his families didn't know each other? First off, I guess he said the press were dishonest parasites. That doesn't mean bigamy's good. Who time to build the wall from the foreigners to hold back the infiltration of alien blood? That's that hero he was hanging around with. Stop giving Nazi salutes and we'll stop calling you Nazi. All right, so international sensation, giving him the right to think that he could have an awe for the Nazis and have women in awe of him being a great husband, and he could just go great. And he was all about wherever it's threatened, he was ready for help the Nazis. America First was his party. Lindbergh was the face of the America First anti-war organization, anti-war against Germany. They say the group's goal was laudable. Lindbergh, Lindbergh, they shouted. September 11, 1941, he gave a speech. September 11 is a big day to me. The Jewish races, for reasons which are not America, wish to involve us in this war. How dare he? He cannot blame them for looking out for what they believe to be their own interest, but we must also look out for ours. We cannot allow the natural passions and prejudice of other people to lead our country away.
I was also a pioneer aviator and one of the sons of the great Guggenheim fortune. He had
Look, I get to hang out with Charlie Lindbergh, and I'm Jewish.
Money to burn, and Guggenheim told Lindbergh.
That's not suspicious to anybody else. Anybody?
Maybe you ought to check this guy out. Well, Lindbergh went to Worcester and spent a day and an evening with Goddard and was overwhelmed. For the rest of his life,
I love these people. And Jews and Gentiles can get along if there's V2 rockets involved.
Lindbergh worshiped Goddard. He thought he was a tremendous genius who was going to raise aviation.
He liked Guggenheim. He flew around with Guggenheim. He worshipped the Goddard, not Jewish.
Level out of the atmosphere.
Guggenheim gave Goddard
There
money
they
to
are.
build rockets, and Lindbergh helped him find a better launch site.
For 20 years, they just took it
Lindbergh
over.
knew the aviation weather of North America.
I'm saying that, you know, the satanic person Parsons that did that jet propulsion laboratories. It's easy. It helps you remember his name because it's jet propulsion and it's Jack Parson. Sometimes people have to do those tricks. Here they are loading one of their hydrogen peroxide rockets, steam rocket.
What set Robert Goddard apart was he was able to use both his mind and his hands.
I know Man, I know so many people that can use their minds and their hands. Don't you guys get sick of that? Oh, this one special guy that could be set apart because what? He could dig a well, or this guy could tie his shoes, and then all of a sudden, out of all the millions, they put this guy out there. And then Guggenheim. We still haven't seen that. I still haven't proved that he sold out everything at the top of the market. But you know it's coming because this is his rockets.
He was able to think of things, and he was able to write about them and theorize.
We can't trust you, Mr. NASA boy.
Might have been earthbound, but he was in his own private paradise.
Yay.
For the next
Look
10
at that
years,
rocket.
Goddard
Doesn't look
and his
very
crew
heavy,
would
does
haul
it? Looks like a
increasingly
balloon. I'm
sophisticated
kidding.
rockets from their workshop
Maybe.
to the launch pad.
That's not a
and
balloon
ignite
because
them.
balloons bend. Whoa, do they automatically
He called his
adjust?
failures, and there were many. Valuable negative information. Despite the failures, Goddard
Army got interested in rocketry as essentially a replacement for artillery and proceeded to fund quite lavishly for the time a set of researchers.
They funded it with fiat money. They were printing fiat money and using slave labor. Come on.
Involved in the development of rocket technology.
The lead scientist was Werner von Braun.
Oh, we heard of him.
After Hitler came to power,
He came to work
he
for the
demanded
United
a
States.
vengeance rocket. Von Braun's team shifted into high gear in a secret facility near the town of Peenemünde. There, they designed and tested the terrifying V2. It could hit targets.
It just looks like they perfected the Goddard stuff that he had patented,
Believe it.
which is why he later sued them when they brought their V2 rockets to the United States and started working for NASA. That's when Goddard really started making bank. What do you got for us, Lucasfilm?
It was not true.
Goddard could not admit the V2 was more advanced than any rocket he'd ever made. By then, his refusal to cooperate with other American scientists had pushed him to the margins. With a war to win, Goddard had sought out government work, but the only military contract he landed was far from ideal.
And the thing is like they put him in charge of something that turned out to be used until the 1960s, still using the hydrogen peroxide kerosene mix that he did. They're trying to act like these J-Los. Not that J-Lo.
And far from Roswell. His assignment, to build rocket assists for heavy aircraft, required that he and his men relocate to a Navy base in Maryland.
There it goes. Shoot off that hydrogen peroxide. They haven't really.
Of course,
government hands, and those hands were busy.
The federal agencies have been using his stuff and not paying any royalties, not in any way.
Oh, it's because the Nazis brought it over and the government said, but, okay, here's some money.
And like Goddard, it learned from its mistakes.
Yeah, because they had to get to the moon. So here's a video I made. I don't get, sometimes I get more than a dozen subscribers, but it's important who listens. The banking family. So I was all over it only from her whore-like prostitution and how she funded it until the government took over and started the WPA Federal Arts Project, where they started paying her boyfriends, Jackson Pollock and others. And
contract with Peggy Guggenheim before they did the Guggenheim Museum. And this was all planned and propped up with money, big money. Remember, Peggy Guggenheim couldn't go to a lot of, she's Jewish, so she couldn't go to a lot of golf course floor studio. That's how I dig it.
I just
Peggy
drag
Guggenheim.
everything out, don't I?
It has been planned. It has been planned by Ahola and Aholaba. The whole Guggenheim family are, friends of the Rothschild. How did they get so rich?
Yeah.
Hint, it's from Meyer Guggenheim.
There he is.
A Swiss citizen of Ashkenazi Jewish heritage who arrived in the United States in 1847. What happened in 1848? The Great Deception, the Great Panic, where Ellen White and Seventh-day Adventists.
I was wrong about that date. I think I'm wrong about that date. It was 1846 or something, dude. Me. So we got the smelting, the refinery. See, I made a mistake.
Yeah. Making all that money so that they could later donate, mold people's minds, and the Guggenheim Aeronautical Library so that they could help their, the German Nazis that funded DARPA all along immigrated from Switzerland in 1847. We heard about that already. He invested in some silver mines in the Leadville mining district.
The rest, everyone else in Leadville went broke, except for Meyer, who decided, I've had enough mining. I'm selling out at the very top of the market. And not only is the price going down, it's going to crash because the United States is going to stop buying silver from, its contract is over and it's not going to keep buying a lot of silver. And he knew it. He got to be the second richest person from raping Colorado.
Really all we need to know. Let's go to the Leadville mining district, 2 miles high, and
Boom.
some became ghost towns. And like Leadville, where Meyer Guggenheim made all his money, so Peggy Guggenheim.
Remember that after 1893, many mining camps became ghost town. We saw Leadville's last gasp, right, when they built the Crystal Palace out of 5,000 tons of ice. I'm telling myself to go.
93, Meyer Guggenheim checked out and said, that's it. I'm leaving. Through his son Benjamin, the art collector and socialite Peggy Guggenheim started
We got more.
New Deal.
See, in this one, I was able to, because this is how Hunter Biden made his money, Hey, Salty, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, Elder Paco?
Was I sharing?
Yeah, oh yeah, nothing. I'm not telling on you.
Okay. Hey, what do you
wanted to-
think? This thing, 2 years, I made the connection to the art world and how they ended up with all these tax-free scams to, prop up the price of crappy art, like from Andy Warhol. That's not good stuff. It's just weird.
Yeah, super weird.
And they charge a high price because that enables the laws where they don't have to, I could be an anonymous on the phone bidder.
Yeah, I
Pay
could see
$2
that.
million for George Bush or Hunter Biden's. That's what they've turned to oil painting to launder money. It's interesting, huh? We're just starting too.
You mentioned, or you're reading Mine or Gold Mine. I was listening to a song the other day by this, I guess he's a poet, but whatever. He's an artist, let's say that. He writes music and he sings. Anyway, in this song, the song title is called Gold Mine Gutted. And I thought about something. You mentioned a lot how there's gold and precious metal and stone inside of our bodies, inside of our temples.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about that? That the gold
gold
mine could be
everywhere.
gold mined? Actually literally from the mine from inside of us? Possibly. You know how they use word trick, gold mine, gold mined. They
I
gutted the gold
believe
mine.
that let me look you people in the eye. And this is that the slag that is on the railroads that are from that time in the early 1900s through about 1911 through maybe the 30s, with what the Black Freemasons were running as, and they calling it the Black Star Line, in a back to Africa movement. Garvey was the man's name. I believe that some of those ships never made it to Africa, and they were burning black people and other people alive in the furnaces and steel mills of the United States, because they believed, when they said, "Show me your metal," they had learned that the human body had precious metal in it. And since they were eugenists, they were Darwinist, and they were getting in trouble for lynching them, I think they melted them and scattered their ashes in slag hills, un momento, that are all over these United States. Check out a slag hill. Where did I look it up at?
You need to share.
So that's just to get the size of them.
There's one near my house. It's a colored mountain and it literally looks the same. It's disintegrating. Or it looks like it's
Well, it's
disintegrating.
the cinders that have burned are gonna go back to dust.
This is a slag hill.
Slag Mountain, right?
Slag mountain. Yeah, no, it is a mountain.
And you see, you can't earlier in I think in the 1900s, they couldn't get just the temperature, get it hot enough to when they were doing batches, and I found leftover body parts in slag that anatomically, as good as anything Roger Spur shows, they were body parts. But that is what's coming up
Yeah.
probably this summer is what I'm gonna return to.
Okay.
But I don't have time to get into my theories about slag. But yeah, the whole thing of show me your metal. We've got, you can do this, that, the other thing. That's all part of it. We got to keep rolling here. So just to let everybody know, steam rockets, hydrogen peroxide as a propellant, same thing. Your thermal rockets, the V2s, they were all built on the people you've heard of. Goddard possibly for the first time today, but Jack Parsons because of his just over the top public Satanism, that kind of weird stuff. If you drop anything, or if in hydrogen peroxide that is physical, it starts boiling and it makes steam. If it's in an enclosed environment, boom. You know what? You're supposed to show a picture of it's basically a nozzle. If you squirted out a nozzle and there's always gas waiting to replace it, it's simply because hydrogen peroxide is so special. And it's not a poison when used in the right dose. These people that talk about it as an alternative medicine, it's been only known about since forever. I use hyperbole because I don't know. But it's weird. It's as weird as water. It's almost water. It is H2O2. In its pure form, it is very pale blue liquid that is slightly more viscous, doesn't stick as much or more than water. It is used as an oxidizer, bleaching agent, antiseptic. High test peroxide is used in rockets. They love the rockets. So this is the proof that we're not going to make this a science project like I want to do, but they use it in the rockets. It's a rocket thing, man. Look at that guy. He knows what he's doing. I am fixing the rocket with hydrogen peroxide. Bipropellant. Not that bi. This, you guys, we've been in the LGBTQ plus way too long. Sergio, can I get an amen on that?
Amen.
Yeah, thank you. That's what looks like a mini version of one of those spy planes. Look at that tiny propeller. Are you kidding me? Oh, it had a rocket assist plane. Okay, the Germans, they were getting after it, right? The Titans used the hydrogen peroxide. I'm not sure if the Saturn did. I think they went back to solid liquid fuel where they could turn it into it. I was excited just to find the connection between the Guggenheims and the rockets because they're basically the ones that ruined arts, and I wanted to consider myself an artist. Now, I wasn't going to show this because this is so hard, and it just is something about to detect the primary antibodies. Blots were incubated with horseradish, peroxidase, conjugated sheep, anti-mouse, L little g big G antibody diluted with 1/5000th. Is that of horseradish or horseradish? Donkey, what? Sometimes I think these people are trying too hard. Any ideas on where you even come up with those ideas? I don't get it. But these are the people that do the thinking for us. Of course, the Soviet Union was on it in 1927, where what Goddard thought he was keeping so secret from Jack Parsons and the others somehow. What was it? When did the Lindbergh start helping him and become, like Lindbergh would show up and go, "I worship you," and then the Nazis would get it, and then the Soviets would get it. When are we going to stop being shocked? But here you go. This is one of those, early jet. You can tell because there's not a propeller on it. And it used this great big hydrogen peroxide steam jet to get it off the ground and maybe get enough. I'll be honest with you. I've been restudying the Kawanda effect and how jets really work. Seem to be a mystery, but this is basically hydrogen peroxide strapped in a bag or something. Let's see what that says. Oh, thank you for the small picture. Wikipedia, you're everybody's best friend. So the Navy's Blue Angels flying a cargo plane using the Fat Albert just assist takeoff during takeoff. Redundantly, Salt Paco reads the sentence like that guy on TV, the Biden that just reads that open quote, or something like that. It's steam power, basically an adjustment of steam power that's been around for a while so they could fake go to the moon. But these J-Lo, look at that one. What in the world could it be carrying that it needed that much help to fly? I don't think I've ever seen that many J-Lo. If I knew a J-Lo song, I would sing it. But I know she's Jenny from the Hood or something like that.
What about the ones that look solid? Would those be balancers?
This is its regular jet. Once these exhaust all of their hydrogen peroxide, they drop off to lighten the load.
Okay.
So they're really their main thing is to, if the air is thin, say the airport is at Denver, mile high, thinner up there. Maybe some of the jets would not be as functional. That's what I took it as, is that it was strictly to help it take off and then drop it off. Seems like they'd run after them. But then again, I saw that big one and they looked like they were permanently attached or something. But it's the refilling of it that's dangerous, because this liquid will blow up and it will eat your finger off in a heartbeat. And they weren't satisfied with it, so they had to bump it up to what? When I strip rocks, I use 35% hydrogen peroxide. These Germany, they went nuts. They were diluting it to 85%. 80 is what T-Stoff is. T-Stoff, stabilized high test peroxide, used by the Germans during World War II. because they had jet assist and they also had the flying bombs that needed the buzz bombs, the steam bombs. But they added methanol, hydrazine, water mixture, because you can cut hydrogen peroxide down to 3% and gargle with it. I've done it.
Now, was that?
So this is one that I thought I'd find more about in the Wikipedia, but I didn't because I mean it had it all: Rolls Royce, rocket engines, hydrogen peroxide. Basically, one article that I didn't want to. A lot of this: turbojets, turbofans, rocket engine. There's one of them. And it's got the shield, so Goddard got paid. The thing is I know that if I wanted to get a chemical reaction, you could go get a hot dog or something and pour in some 35% hydrogen peroxide, medical grade, and throw in that hot dog, and it will bubble up and eat up that hot dog and make tons of bubbles until it is finished, and there's no more hot dog. It's completely gone. And that's what powers. So when those bubbles get caught in these cylinders, there's no place for it to go except through a very thin nozzle. And that causes, the thinner the nozzle, the better the shape. Shoots out this is what they call steam, which is basically H2O2. I will remind you, and then you'll say that seems right. It's water vapor, and it's going to disappear like contrails used to disappear when I was a young man in the 60s watching them experiment with it. Those were the days of innocence. I was still in my sin, but I didn't have the things I think about going on today. So there's a lot. These rocket engines use hot cycle, 4 use cold cycle. That's the ones we just looked at. That's the Davalent Sprite. One of the ones, maybe we haven't looked at it yet. The hot ones, probably bigger. Definitely longer on that one. Yeah, let's shoot it out, jet assist boy. All right. Man, how do we get to Leadville? There's still a tourist town here in Colorado, in Leadville, where Meyer Guggenheim made all his money and then sold out at the top of the market. It was a lead for the steam revolution, mining town that was, like always, Colorado. They worked the people here like slaves, thought they had a bunch of money, and then got the rug pulled out from underneath us one more time, and all the gold, all the silver, all the money that was here left with Guggenheim. Horace Tabor was basically the Gentile set up to take the fall, the Bonanza King, the Silver King. He divorced his wife of 25 years, married a floozy. They called her Baby Doe Tabor when she married him, and they lived like kings, even though they were not the best. But Horace Tabor, August Tabor, it just became a big town, I showed you the pictures. Here's from where they found the gold, and there's the start of Leadville in the back there. 1880, that's it. Remember, we saw 79 and 83 from above. There's 1882. Maybe that's the one we saw. Probably, because now the gold there, doesn't that look like a body part? Or does that look like it blew up off of first it crash landed from outer space because they say that's where the gold came from, gathered in spots, got hot, popped to the top, and some of it looks like body parts used for electrical wiring. This must have been a very good repenter at the end to say, and I wish I would have listened to Noah or something like that. That's what it looked like then. It's what it looks like now. And that's one of the tallest mountains in Colorado. I live by a few of those. Now they got races, ultra marathons, kit houses. That's a kit house. You buy it in a kit, they ship it. Wherever you got a train, they can get it to you. And there's that ice palace. Don't worry, I think I have that pulled up. These chairs, everything. This was the most expensive opera house in the world. And some of the most famous people in the world traveled to Leadville to perform there. Even scoundrels like that Oscar Wilde bringing in and talking about the new types of art in the world. So remember, all of this was filled in '83, but now they got this part over here. Maybe that was just the aerial shot. People still live here. The mines were out here, up here, roads. Second largest city in Colorado for quite a while. And believe me, this is summertime. It gets cold up there, man. Does it mention where it's got to mention iron smelting? Of course, the Guggenheims ended up controlling, even having to put the Rockefeller in his place there for a while. They kept control of all the smelting after they sold at the top of the market. The city's fortune declined with the repeal of the Sherman Purchase Act in '93. Boom, it crashed. Mining companies relied increasingly on the lead and zinc. It crashed. It was not good. Historical Nobels. They talk about the Matt Dillon. That came from a quick drawing sheriff named Mart Dugan there in Leadville. Poker Alice was there. We're still waiting for the second richest man in the world who made his fortune there to get his thing. Doc Holliday arrived there shortly after the gunfight at OK Corral. Holy cow, he killed the next policeman over threatening him for failing to pay a $5 bill. They let him go. They knew it was him. The unsinkable Molly Brown and Meyer Guggenheim started out in Leadville, started out going door to door selling that lace, making fortune, having children, working as factories, quit trying to BS us. Family went on to possess the second largest fortune in the world, or at least in the United States. And now they only care about being good museum owners. Here's that Oscar Wilde came in April of 1882 to talk about the aesthetic movement, a new art movement where people are just interested in the art itself. Doesn't have to have a meaning or teach a lesson or create a parallel. It's art for art's sake, not somebody named art. Here's this one. There's this. I was just shocked to hear that even when the blacks were being like ruthlessly killed because they were set up by the other Freemason. I should look up, show you some of that.
Land may not have been the initial impetus for violence. There were certainly a handful of whites who were able to economically prosper from it.
Other properties present more of a challenge. They use angles and distances, refer to obscure landmarks that no longer exist, and generally require more time to relocate. For instance, a deed dated to 1908 records a rectangular property along the railroad, purchased for use by the Magnolia Lodge No. 148, the local African American Masonic Lodge. Historical aerial photographs often prove vital with reconstructing these boundaries, allowing us to relocate them in the present.
Sometimes.
This is our primary method for reconstructing historical boundaries in these kinds of rural locations, places that never had city directories or historical maps.
They got a name for
It involves
this.
examining thousands of historical deeds for more than 50 years to understand the growth and development of both Rosewood and Sumner. It represents a novel use of historical records to inform a type of landscape analysis common to archaeological
13th
studies of the past.
census.
Reconstructing historical property boundaries acts like a predictive model. It offers a powerful method for predicting the location of archaeological resources, like homes, industrial sites, and so forth.
Where's that one about the...
Testing this model is
Well, I'm
remained a
glad
central
I
goal of
kept that
archaeological
one.
dated to 1908.
Did it mention the lodge number 148?
Records a rectangular property along the railroad, purchased for use by the Magnolia Lodge No. 148.
Purchased for use by the Magnolia Lodge. It doesn't say that. It just says it's between the W.A. Sauls and S.M. Sauls and his wife of the county of Levi in the state of Florida, parties of the first part, and Magnolia Lodge number 148 of free and accepted Masons. Levi County, Florida, party of the second part. Did they all talk like that?
The local African American Masonic Lodge.
Oh, it was a Prince Hall.
Historical aerial photographs often prove vital with reconstructing.
I just missed it before. So they just killed them.
Florida, many resisted, and the Second Seminole War began in 1830.
That looks like a Freemason. You know, the Indians joined the Freemasons too. Native Americans, indigenous. Take your choice.
Over the next 2 decades, tensions again mounted when the U.S. government attempted to.
But they've sold us all of this to where the money ended up. Hey, let's go to the moon.
61,745 slaves on the eve of the Civil War in 1861. Upwards of 1,000 slaves escaped Florida during the war. Following the war, African Americans in many areas outnumbered their white neighbors, and numerous.
That wasn't going to work. Not at all. Explain why.
They'd be replaced by other immigrants coming from overseas, but the opportunity for immigrants to come from overseas is dried up because of the war in Europe. And so factory owners, factory managers.
Somebody's got to make the bombs.
Are looking for labor. What seems strange is that because race relations are so bad, you would think that whites in the South would say, good, be gone, we don't want you, we don't need you. But African Americans are needed in the South because they provide the labor for the Southern economy, a labor based upon agricultural toil, a labor based upon using African Americans as cheaply as possible. The Great War, World War I, the war fought to make the world safe for democracy, as President Woodrow Wilson said. Well, African Americans joined the army in droves by the thousands, just like white Americans. And they pretty quickly understand the irony of fighting to make a world safe for democracy when there's no democracy for them.
No democracy in the United States. Towns getting burned. 5 dead. One little town.
Fear will basically encapsulate that area that week. People will leave for fear that things are going to get worse, which they do. That Thursday night is when most of the violence took place, when whites visited the home of the carriers, who had all been gathered in one house because they expected trouble. Men, women, and children were there.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. I'm Lady Parents Weren't Broke. He was able to go to school, so many things that other people were not able to do. And I think that's what birthed that vision to even have a shipping line.
There he is.
To think on that level in
Big guy in the
1919.
middle.
He reportedly
Marcus
named
Garvey.
the Black Star Line after the White Star Line.
I think that he delivered people because he had his like, they don't want us. Let's go back to Africa. Yeah, I am going. He was rich, so rich, universal improvement.
Now, the way they were able to raise this money is that the UNIA members would purchase a share. So at only 6 months in business, the BSL board or the Black Star Line board recapitalized the company at $10 million. That would have been like 176
Did she say after 6 months?
$1 million today. The naysayers were shocked. Didn't nobody think he was going to be able to do what he was doing from the money that he generated.
I bet that there was a small group of people in charge who knew he was going to be able to do what he thought he was going to do.
Did he plan to get the Black people who wanted to go back to Africa, and then build an economic system by having a shipping line to make sure they were never without what they needed. So after founding the company, Garvey bought the first of 4 ships. We'll talk about 3.
Okay, so the genius has made a bunch of money by starting small.
When he advertised for the people to invest, he didn't put the picture of the boat that they currently own. He put the picture of the boat that they were trying to buy. The boat was called the Orion. Now, they didn't own it at that point, but they were in a deal or trying to make a deal for it. But Hoover said since they didn't own it, it was false advertising. So in 1922, Garvey stood trial. And while on trial, he admitted, I don't know why his lawyer let him say this, but he said $600,000 or $17 million today blew in the wind. He couldn't account for where the money was spent.
She's so fine, there's no telling where the money went. You ever hear that one?
No.
They also raised the money for him to buy
That was by
one
Robert
last boat
Palmer.
while he was out on bail. So this is the last boat that he bought. It was called.
And I think that just many desperate people, because I can show that cinders end up being body parts, and I welcome a challenge. Heroes, heroines of Leadville surviving after the economy broke. Leadville founded 1887. Horace Austin, Warner Tabor, no mentions of the Guggenheims. They raped that town. So 1895, we know everything went crash in 1893, and Guggenheim was long gone, but still in a last-ditch, desperate attempt to bring tourists to Leadville, 250 men working around the clock finished a palace, 58,000 square feet, as big as a football field, made of 180,000 board feet of lumber to separate the ice and 5,000 tons of ice. The palace was supported by a complex work. I thought that it was crazy that they had a roller skating rink inside. You know, it was like a mall. It was 50 cents for adults, 25 cents for children. But it was a financial disaster. So, like everything else, when the stock market crashes, it doesn't look good. Oh, man. Let's see. I don't even see now where it says that. Let's see what else we got here. So the Leadville, this was the Tabor Opera House in 1879. At the time, it was the most expensive building in Colorado. Wow. Because, you know, a lot of those buildings in Denver, you can tell those are old mud floods that they were those ones that they found with the canals. So refresh your memory with a look of it in 1879. This must be it. This is big.
So basically, the first explorers, quote unquote, were just finding cities everywhere that were like ghost towns, let's call them, you know,
And
post
that's all
millennialism.
that's left up here now.
Yeah.
Ghost towns everywhere. This used to be a big town because you could ship in these factories. If you could get a railroad hooked up to it, you could ship in the factories, buy them in a kit, and assemble them like Legos. Now here's that main. This might is the main. Maybe this is it. In the 79. The Crystal House housed a ballroom, 180-foot skating rink, curling rink. It was a financial bust. Don't you feel sorry for him a little bit? Their Freemasons probably said this is the worst idea ever. Crazy even what they're thinking of. Cleared partly by dynamite, couldn't wait for it to melt. Stone masons worked like ice masons, paid $20 to $30 a week. All right. So we have Leadville being used because it was needed for steam. We have Charles Lindbergh as a bigamist giving a speech on September 11, 1941, to a crowd in Des Moines. The Jewish races, for reasons which are not American, wish to involve us in this war. We cannot blame them for looking out for what they believe their own interest, but we must also look out for ours. He must not allow our natural passion, said the man with 3 wives, and prejudice to let other people, because nobody believes their prejudices aren't true. So the idea is Cloud City. We have Leadville. We have it. Not only was there gold and silver and lead, there was molybdenum, uranium, and some of the other what they called rare metals, so that they could continue faking, that they were going to build an atomic bomb to end World War II, which basically was trying to raise your generation, Sergio, to believe that, well, we had some racism, but we had some, their history has blacks and whites working together, the smart ones. And sure, there were some hiccups along the way, a hitch in the giddy up, but the manifest destiny of the United States is unhindered and continues. How does that make you feel, Sergio?
Well, I thought, yeah, and USA was number one.
Take your time.
I thought USA was number one, But I also did question, why do we have to stick our nose in everyone's business? Why do we have to be the heroes, But it seemed like a noble thing.
You kind of made it that way. Yeah, go ahead.
That was my mentality as an adolescent, a youth.
No, refresh my memory. You were an adolescent around 2005?
I was born in 87.
You were born in 87. Okay, so you were early teens.
2005, I think I was
right.
getting
So
ready to exit.
2001 in your early teens probably was a pretty big surprise.
Early teens, I'm in Los Angeles County. Eyes not opened. After high school, you know, still. But I never loved money. Never loved money. My eyes became, I guess you could say, I started to see after 9/11, honestly.
How long did that take? It took me until 2011.
Well, when I was in high school,
2012.
it happened. I was in,
I didn't buy into the hoax. I knew America was bad,
yeah.
didn't trust it, but I just thought the inhumanity of that, we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, no, we wouldn't do that. And when the internet was, you know, put out there, I saw a guy's head. I saw it, what do they call it? When they remove the head? He was decapitated, they cut it off, So that was another, I think, hoax or psyop to entice or incite the American public. My generation, I was fresh out of high school, so it seemed like they were recruiting for new soldiers because it pissed me off. But then come to think about it, it's like, well, wait a minute. How do you know that's real? First of all, it's super grainy. Either way, it worked, you
It,
know.
it worked like in that because most people had forgotten that we had already been at war. We had Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf who introduced the term shock and awe when we first went and taught Saddam a lesson, And it turns out
Yeah, I
Iraq
remember.
really didn't have anything to do with bin Laden, but they claimed that they had weapons of mass destructions.
Yeah, we were gonna find them.
Yeah, they're still looking.
Yeah, but by my early 20s, I went through the whole thing as in a social life. I think that was the Lord, expediting that process, that prodigalness. I came to that end of the road by like 21. I was tired of it, and I could say by that time is when he began to show me truth, and I could see that we were living in an evil land. Government's lying, and you can't trust almost anything you see. And what they're telling you history is. Um,
That's for sure.
Found the Lord, or he found me in 2017, and since then, yeah, it's just been one big expose of the government and
Wow,
this truth serum.
man. I tell you, I basically can kind of start, I remember getting baptized in like 1968 and, you know, going to church by myself. My family only went on Christmas and Easter when I could. And then we moved to the farm. And I did, I felt I was morally trying to bang every girl in high school from age 16 to 18.
Sure.
I felt that was my civic duty. But then when I was, 20, I ended up 19, I think. They did Iran took 440 hostages, and I was looking for a job anyway. I didn't want to hang around. I had tried my luck in California and come back. Went in there to, join the army, find myself into my early 20s. Had started was still smoking weed. You could smoke weed in the army back then. They didn't
Okay.
blood test you like they do now.
Yeah.
They started in 1981. So, everything was cool. I got into the 82nd Airborne. I became a surveyor. They taught me trigonometry, even though I had only had 1 year of math in high school, freshman algebra, like everybody else. They made me a surveyor. I ended up working on what they call the PADS, parallel azimuth direction system, because my life has always been like that, because I was born to my dad, who is like a legend in the union movement and the electricians. And
Okay.
it just kept going. It kept going. I ended up working on pads. And then I found out about flat earth. And I was just like, holy cow, I'm that guy. But when I was in the army, I had my first vision. And it was, you know, I was tripping. I was doing LSD. I was smoking marijuana. Everybody else had left, but it was Saturday night, and I had gotten in the habit of going to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
So I was alone in the barracks, tripping, reading the Bible with a Playboy magazine in my drawer, you know. And when I closed the Bible after reading the Sermon on the Mount and had read the Bible, I read it that one last time, the Sermon on the Mount, and I closed the Bible and I said, I can't find one thing wrong with anything Jesus ever said. And at that time, I got like put into a cloud bubble, plasma bubble, and lowered onto the bed because I just had to turn down and lay down. But it seemed like I never touched the bed, like I was floating above it.
Yeah.
And for some time, in the spirit only, no voices or anything like that ever, God basically had me like I was Pythagoras' student, just asking question after question, like, is this electric bubble? Is kind of like what I was starting with. And I ended up going, so I'm going to live my life that everything Jesus said was true. It pop, bam, I landed on the bed and I looked around.
Yeah.
No residual LSD, no residual marijuana. I was completely straight.
Wow.
And I went 7 years without masturbating. That's my personal record.
That's awesome.
And I had been because girls were throwing them at me. I used to have a hair like you, dude, and it seemed like that's all it took because right now I don't get a second look.
Yeah.
I'm glad too because that's the last
Yeah.
thing I need,
Right.
especially around here.
Wow. Okay. That's the first time I heard the whole story of the first
Right.
version.
Well, then the deal was that I did believe that. I proved it in my mind, everything except a few things. That light was tricky, sound was tricky, and I was
Yeah.
stuck. The last thing, because it wasn't poetic language. I excluded myself from having to understand that and believe that, you know, Jesus was, yeah. But anyway, it did say that the stones would cry out. He said that. So it had to be true. And that is what took me until 2014. And when I realized that, oh my goodness, the stones are reserved in judgment, there really were those titans. That's what led me to believe that means that everything he said was true about that generation. And I realized I hadn't solved everything. The vision wasn't complete. So then I started a channel called Flat Earth Nation, Golden Age Past, and then a month and a half into that, I had my second vision. And when I got out of it, my next show was on the Voynich manuscript, and I was telling them, ladies and gentlemen, you will always be confused about the Voynich manuscript because you're trying to put its botany outside in the physical realm when it is actually showing you botany, flora, and fauna that is growing inside of us and expressing that there are 5 different kingdoms that live in us and that we basically are their best hope because they are pneuma. They have their own DNA. They are like beasts of the field. And if what half of what they say is true, all of those things in us do is they think they're farming. Most of them breed by mating for life, bury their dead. Some of them, when they get done making their houses and they push it to the back, we call it earwax. It's that complicated. And when we sleep, they
Doesn't
sleep.
seem complicated.
When we eat, they eat. What we eat, they eat.
Well, we've
And
seen, they're basically,
they
like
keep us
alive.
from getting sick when we treat them correctly. As what are we supposed to act like? The temple of God. Know ye not? We are
That's what the Earth
temples.
reminds me of. It reminds me of a bunch of cells all around it. I mean, the patterns and the silhouettes, just so you can have a mental image, they look so similar. They look identical almost. There's just so much, how the lungs and the trees are basically the same thing.
Yeah.
They look identical. I mean, it's
And
all over the place, just for
I
example.
know. And every generation,
I don't see a
it
contradiction.
seemed, always wanted to believe
Yeah.
in the swastika, that there was something in our electric miasma of our personal battery operated vortex that would lead them to think the swastika is the in with the good blood after it's been cleaned by the lung and out with the bad, so it can get refreshed and put back in, and you will keep going for your appointed time, because each one of us has an appointment with death. And death is what? Nothing. You cannot find out who you really are until you die. You are a seed. You are a spiritual seed that really exists for one reason. You're an object lesson to angels. I wonder if you heard that last night when I touched on that.
Not last night, but I was following you now.
All right. Well, if you're tracking me now, I'm going to share this screen and show that this whole fleshly titan thing of Jesus even being in the flesh in the first place is for one reason. Verse 8 in 1 John chapter 3 gives us that reason. The reason there is a Son of God that appeared was to destroy the works of the devil.
Okay, yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
And the devil had been sinning from the beginning. And the devil, or somebody highly influenced by the devil that was deep in sin, showed up with sin, trying to tempt Adam and Eve. So we can't say, oh, that was the first sin, can we?
What do you say?
I'm saying no. I don't think we can. I'm thinking that if God came to destroy the sin of the devil, it was what was going on in heaven. Because if he's the one that sinned from the beginning and he's a liar, I don't think that he understood God knows his every word, thought, and deed also.
Mm-hmm.
And it became evident that there are children of God and children of the devil.
Absolutely. It's one or the other is how I see it. I don't see an in between, but maybe there is, but I don't see one.
I also last night was talking about the book of Revelation chapter 12. And I thought that, I hope that this goes over and it'll give me a chance, to go over it again too, because,
Okay, yeah.
here we're looking at it's a great sign, and this is symbolic. You don't have to look for this really happening. This is symbolic. Sign of a woman in heaven clothed with the sun, moon under her feet, on her head, crown of 12 stars.
Right.
Because we when Joseph was having a dream and Jacob was having a fit, going, we know you're talking about me and your mom worshiping you with first it was your 12 brothers, now it's us too.
Yeah.
We know that that's what happened. But that's when he's basically, saying, not happening yet. But when
Isn't
it
it
does,
interesting?
at the end of this generation, and then, this is the only time besides that book of Daniel, which it tells us to look at, It
Mhm.
says to start looking for that time, half of times, which I think some people call the 1,260 days, but I'm not sure because I don't, it's not a big part of my life. Their dispensationalism baloney.
Oh, that, yeah,
I
right.
go with the 1,335 will end it all, in
Mhm.
Daniel 12. But there it
Basically, yeah.
is. So what I was talking about last night was that, so now devil knows it's on. The devil's like, okay, you're on to me, here's the vision. His tail swept down a third of the stars of the heaven and cast them to the earth. All right. Well, we know that. Wasn't that when the second batch of the people went out, when Jesus said, go out and start healing people and casting out demons? And they did. And they came back and they were thrilled. And he said, it was amazing. We were casting out demons in your name and everything was good. And Jesus said, I saw Satan cast down from heaven. Well, here's the prophet. In 12:4, his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven, cast them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. I believe that's symbolic also. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule. That's not. All the nations with a rod of iron. So everything is going to always be fighting the spirit of people that are going to be needing that rod of correction. But her child, our Messiah, was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled to the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. War arose in heaven, Sergio.
Yeah.
He doesn't say, and then I saw, or anything. This is the same thing about the Messiah. And his angels fighting back. This is a real war in heaven. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place in heaven for them. Wonder when this was happening. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Interesting. I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of our Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. Revelation 12, this was to you Christians. Hey, you Christians, read this. It's about the end. Verse 11. They've been accused day and night, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb. So this has given us kind of a timestamp. We know when this was happening, and by the word, or when it was going to happen, to when it was prophesied, and when now it's actually happening. For they loved not their lives even to death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness and be nourished again for those times, and half time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river, so that the dragon had poured from its mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring. That would be the other Christians, that
Yeah.
and it says, and her offspring, to explain it, on those who keep the commandments of God and timestamp hold to the testimony of Jesus. So he
That's
continues.
right.
He stood on the sand of the sea, and then he saw the first beast. This is all one deal. Who's like the beast? 42 months. So
The
this
thing
is all
about it,
leading.
I was gonna ask you, the thing about it is it doesn't always specify if it's like you said, one deal, you know. You kind of have to go with what you've read in the other books and put it and put it together.
Right. There are, you know, the Bible clears up when you realize that we have the book of Acts to explain the epistles. We can understand in the book of Romans, while Paul was saying, look, we don't, we know it's confusing. How come the Gentiles can eat this stuff and you can't? And this, that, and what can they eat? And some people saying we shouldn't eat it at all, and other people are going like, you must be crazy. And so don't judge them on what they eat. And then there's Acts 15, where it says, look, there's a lot of confusing, and now Jews are saying you have to do this, you have to do that. And then they straightened it out. And then
Right.
from that point on in the book of Acts and the letters after the Romans to the other people, it's clear. If you're a Jew, you eat clean. If you're not, if you're a Gentile, nobody can tell you what to eat.
Yeah,
And that's just
I
the way it
agree.
goes. So a lot of these things clean up when you get the doctrine pouring out. But I didn't think it would take 2 hours to go over it, but I appreciate you hopping it on. Yes, we are the body of Christ. Are we not? Yes, we are. And not only that, we should treat ourselves like a temple because, thank you for that reminder, Marcella. What does the Bible say? We're saved by grace, given talents to do good works to glorify his name. If we're saved by grace, that's what it tells us we're supposed to do. And then we're not judged on, was I called? No. Did you use your talents properly? Because if you don't, we have those examples. See ya. And take that talent and give it to the one who worked the hardest. And when we're judged, it says in the book of life, it's not on whether we accepted grace, it's what we've done with it, because that's what proved we really had it. Anything you want to close with? And then we're going to get out of here, Mr. Sergio.
Have the faith and works of Jesus. Make sure.
Yes. Every work we do is because of the work that he did. And in this life, we are going to suffer.
And do it with love.
And
Or
he
else,
will
or else you're
correct
nothing.
us sometimes, even when we haven't done anything, that we know about. But he loves those who creates, who he corrects. And he tells us that by doing those things that we're capable of, we are literally building up gold, silver, and precious stones that will be fit into Christ because we are his body. I think that's what Marcella was hinting at. It might have been nice if I said it. I hope that's it. But that's what I got. So the gold, silver, and precious stones in us, because nobody can carry their treasure in us, but we can build it up. So it's there in our heart. Me and my friends are never, ever going to tell you anything else. We know we're called, chosen, predestined, elect, and have made a choice to hit our knees and confess we're worthy of death. But he has legally adopted us. And we are kings and priests that have our own temples. We know what they don't. We're required to preach to them, knowing the vast majority, to them it will be the stench of death. But to our future brothers and sisters, and to those who it's a great joy when they come back and after they've fallen away, it's the breath of life. They'll hear his voice. Me and my friends are never going to tell you anything else. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen. Nakame.